This year, I've been consuming a lot of media from my childhood. Whether it be a dated and lovably cringy pop-punk album, a television show all about video games by people who play video games, or a seemingly never-to-be-finished web series that I somehow enjoyed more on this most recent watch than ever before, there's been a lot to take in with revisiting these older products and seeing how they hold up or don't. Mostly though, I'm surprised by how much I still enjoy them. But one show in particular stands out amongst the rest, and unfortunately someone else already made a video about Shadow of Israfel, so let's talk about Big Time Rush, and what I think is the best episode of the show instead. And with the guys set to make a return in probably about now, considering when I'll have the video done, I figured it'd be the perfect time. Also, just want to give a quick disclaimer that I have so many thoughts on the show and the most minute details of it, so this video will probably end up being longer than I want, like every video I make. But you can probably already see that, and you chose to click on it anyway. For those of you who are not cultured enough to immediately jump out of your chair with excitement at the sound of those glorious O's, Big Time Rush was a Nickelodeon comedy show that ran from 2009 until 2013, paralleling and spawning the real-life boy band of the same name. The show followed the lives of 4 hockey players from Minnesota who become a boy band, mostly out of their control or want, but in order to ensure that one of the 4 is able to chase his dream of becoming a singer, the leader of the group convinces an overly aggressive and currently quite irrelevant music producer to take them all to LA and make them a group, since the music producer has a specific interest in the leader after an explosive and impressive performance. Ooh. The 4 boys move out to Los Angeles, and that is the general idea. Comedy and other shenanigans ensue. Except not really, because the first season of the show is fairly grounded in its depiction of a seemingly glamorous but mostly cynical and exhausting life of being a mega celebrity in Los Angeles. At least when compared to the later seasons, this first season is kind of quaint and focused in a way that the others fail, trading out and diluting the inner workings of being a pop star, showcased hilariously through the fragility of it all, for some extremely over-the-top comedy. Not really a bad thing though, if I may. I mean, look at how often their careers are needlessly on the line throughout season 1, the deadlines and stresses of it all. Think about how many pop stars didn't make it and the ones who did but immediately fell off. In that sense, season 1 is quite novel. It's all about these 4 boys becoming something that only one of them wanted to be and realizing that they actually all love singing. Together. So season 1 is pretty simple, and most of the episodes and jokes are about them trying and failing to become pop stars. You know, trying to learn dances, trying to stay educated, trying to put on shows, all that stuff. Season 2 is straight up absurd in comparison. I can imagine some don't like it as much because it kind of goes nowhere and doesn't have much of a story aside from new album, I guess. I don't mind it since the show is still funny and consistently so, but it's a lot harder to really describe what season 2 is going for. In a way, the show could have almost ended after 1 season. By the end of the season, the boys had more or less achieved the goal of becoming a pop sensation, so the remaining seasons are just varying degrees of that same success. With season 2, they've already moderately made it, so there isn't a whole lot of concern in regard to them not selling an album well or struggling to sell out a show. Instead, it's more satirical and surreal, with crazed rival producers trying to steal albums, or having to make an unnecessary EP for Christmas, or being forced to take part in a stupid and fake reality series. It's less about the goal of becoming pop stars and more about the characters themselves. It's just in far more wacky scenarios. Some characters go through pretty emotional stuff and we see the effects of it. They all go into pairs to write their own songs. We learn more about their pasts through their mothers. The groundwork has been laid, and now it's time to dive in. Big time. Ho ho. This was a mistake. I guess my point here is that while the show does get considerably sillier, when it wants to rein it in and focus on a topic, it's usually done pretty well. Season 1 just plays it a lot drier, or at the very least feels a lot drier to me. Though to be fair, season 4 does kind of veer back around to this idea, with the very first episode touching on the possibility of Big Time Rush becoming irrelevant due to the rise of boy bands like One Direction, The Wanted, remember them, Colourful Pants, and my personal favourite, Hair Free. Because of course, fuck me, this show is so good. One Direction actually used to open for Big Time Rush before massively overshadowing them. A lot of season 4 feels very self-aware with certain topics. It's aged surprisingly well. But unfortunately, I was not able to watch any more of season 4. You see, I procrastinate. A lot. And oh boy, if you only knew. And it just, well, I'm about to tell you, so you will know, so okay, anyway. And it just so happens that I took so long to start season 4 that by the time I got around to it, Netflix had removed the show and I was unable to watch it all. I was sitting pretty watching the show from June through to the end of July, at which point I had finished with season 3 and the show had disappeared. By the 7th of September, the show seemed to be back and working, only to disappear within 20 minutes or so when I refreshed the page. Literally 5 minutes later, it reappeared and was working again. About 10 hours later, the show was gone. Again. It was 5 days later when I saw it reappear once again on Netflix, which was excellent timing since I was just moments prior debating a Paramount Plus subscription as it would presumably be on there. I was losing my marbles at this point, as pictured. 2 hours later, oh, it's gone, fuck it. As of writing this, that was about 10 days ago, and while I was able to watch episode 2 on the 15th, since then I haven't been able to even spot those gorgeous 4 boys. And it is now early into December, and I have only just gotten around to working on this video properly. Oh good god. It's also currently the 18th of December as I record this. But I'm massively getting ahead of myself here. It's been a while, alright? Netflix and Paramount Plus also showed their pure and disgusting hatred for the show by not even getting the episodes in the right order. The way the episodes are ordered here is based off of when they were shot, not when they were released. So I had to go through everything and reorder all myself. Otherwise, Joe would have appeared just a few episodes after leaving to go to New Zealand. So here's a screenshot of all the episodes listed in the proper order, with season 1 omitted because that season was actually fine. You're welcome, Netflix, and etc. Also, another quick disclaimer. Due to my borderline unhealthy procrastination, Netflix all of a sudden started blocking my screen recorder, which means that for a lot of the footage used in this video, I kind of had to set up this absolute monstrosity in order to showcase any of what I'm talking about. I'm really sorry about this. I know it probably looks awful, but it was really the best I could do on short notice. This video, maybe more than any other I've ever made, had so many roadblocks and interruptions. And it's annoying because this is the sort of video which will either get like 2 views or 2 million views. So like, I don't know what's gonna happen here, to be honest, lads. So yeah, sorry about that one. So, in case you have also forgotten what the point of this video was, it's about time we talk about the best episode of Big Time Rush. But before that momentous moment, let's have a quick chat about some other great episodes, namely the best episodes of the 3 other seasons, which will tell you what season the episode is in. Ooh, if you're paying attention, that is. To start, we of course have Season 1. As mentioned just a moment ago, Season 1 is by far the most simple and basic of the series. With that, I think Season 1's main strong point is that aforementioned focus and how it establishes the character dynamics, which is something I am yet to do. You know, it's your fairly typical archetypal stuff. You've got the leader / occasional boy band in actually a unique turn of events in Kendall, the vain but motivated pretty boy in James, the wild card and oftentimes butt of many a joke and character that they kind of just don't know what to do with most of the time in Carlos, the equally reviled and revered controversial figure in Logan.
I don't care at all what you've done before. I really want this to be
and the nerdy, not very choreographically coordinated Hortense. Yeah, I bet you forgot his actual name was Hortense, but that shit's canon. Anyway, strangely enough, my favorite episode of the first season is the very first episode, Big Time Audition. Despite the obvious awkwardness and them still working out the kinks, this first episode just has a special quality to it that I don't think any other episode comes close to replicating. It is a pilot episode, of course, but it feels weirdly very conclusive and complete by the end, despite the show's continuation. It's like they didn't know if the show would continue, so they just wrote it to be this little slice of a thing, and it's really satisfying to watch. It being a whole hour, or really 45 minutes, is also a surprisingly consistent mark of quality for this show, as we will continue to see. And most of the humor is a little more subdued than even later episodes. I'd actually consider it the funniest episode of the entire show as well, though that is mostly due to this one moment that caught me so off guard I must have rewatched it several times. It's just a cozy time. While every other episode has, rather impressively, several plot lines all occurring at once, this episode really focuses in on the guys and immediately gets you understanding them. The fact they all care so much to help James get to an audition is so great and speaks volumes to their bond. Their James Bond. I feel like most characters would have ridiculed him or prevented him from going because it's an unattainable dream, but they're so adamant and dedicated to getting their friend there, and it's just sweet. Most characters of this time and on these networks were just casually abusing each other in ways that you look back on as being kind of dramatic. Big Time Rush, of course, has its fair share of satire and commentary on the pop industry, but it's honestly far more subdued and intelligently done, I think. And sure, these guys can get angry with each other or even throw the odd punch, but it never felt mean-spirited and cynical in an obnoxious way like on iCarly or Victorious. It's one of the reasons I think this show has aged well. Whenever there is a conflict, the guys usually manage to talk it out and get to the bottom of it, like how in Season 2's finale, the guys couldn't stop fighting because of a video game. If it was iCarly, the episode would have probably just ended with nothing being learned, but here, we actually see them overcoming the spats, and I think that's pretty neat. Touching on that, there's also a specifically great moment in Season 4 where they set up a whole joke about some weird homeless looking guy who comes around and sells oranges to people during a traffic jam, only to subvert that and actually portray him as a decent and caring person. They didn't have to do that, but it's just nice to see how they approach something like that compared to iCarly, which notoriously everyone on that show just hates homeless people. Anyway, the general conceit of our pilot is that James really wants to be a singer, when Gustavo Rock, the aforementioned irrelevant music producer who's very angry indeed, comes to their town, the guys try their best to get James there on time. Gustavo, unfortunately, is not a fan of James despite his clear skill, and when chewed out by the record producer, Kendall decides to step in to defend his friend.
Oh, friend!
What a guy. Yes. Unfortunately, Kendall ends up stealing the whole show with an unbelievable level of sass and literally knocks Gustavo out of his chair, which leads Gustavo somehow to Kendall's house, offering him the chance to come to LA with him and become a megastar. Kendall has no interest in doing so, but is quickly convinced by his friends that there's no reason to not do it, so Kendall calls up Gustavo and agrees, with the exception that he'll only go if Gustavo takes all 4 of them and makes them a group. So immediately, it's an interesting idea because most groups are usually predicated around the thought that one person is destined to break off and become a solo star, Gustavo clearly seeing Kendall as his man, which actually comes back in the penultimate episode of the show, which is a really nice touch. And so a lot of Season 1 sees the boys pushing back on the tropes and stereotypes that comes with being in a boy band, like how there must be a bad boy, how they have to change who they are, and how they dress. But for the most part, the guys are pretty adamant about not forgetting their roots. Overall, I just think this 2-part pilot episode is really wholesome and cute. And while I enjoy the tone and silliness of the show going forward, I also wouldn't have minded this more chill and low-key version. Also, shout out James for no reason other than exceeding my very low expectations of him. You see, I had a theory that throughout the show James would throw more, we'll say shade, towards Kendall due to some resentment that Gustavo favored him, but to my surprise and delight, there is virtually none of that. Good on you, James. Skipping Season 2. Oh, I wonder why. It's probably because the episode's in Season 2. And moving on to Season 3, we have Episode 6, Big Time Surprise. Big Time Surprise is easily one of the best episodes in the entire show. In fact, you might just say it's a perfect Big Time Rush episode. It truly ticks all of the boxes. There are many shenanigans, plenty of great physical humor, some pretty great meta writing, and of course, 2 of the male characters dress up like women, because that happens quite a bit actually. I guess even the non-problematic Nickelodeon creators also had their kinks. The gist of this episode is that Kendall is trying to ask out the new-ish girl, Lucy, but before he has the chance to, thanks to the other guy's antics, Lucy's ex-boyfriend, Beau, shows up trying to win her back. Thankfully, Beau is almost immediately outed as a bit of a sex pest, and the guys try to catch him in the act so that Lucy will see the truth. The humor centered around this is great. It just keeps escalating from Camille trying to seduce Beau in a genuinely hilarious romp around the Palmwoods elevator system, only for James and rare appearer to the show, Jet Stetson, to dress up as women in order to do the same thing. I'm not sure why Camille couldn't have just tried to do it again, but to be fair, the 2 pretty boys are in the midst of an argument revolving around who the most attractive is in the Palmwoods. And also they probably enjoy doing it since they've just done it so many times. To no one's surprise, James is revealed to be the hottest person living at the Palmwoods, as Beau actually goes to kiss him when he has the decision. Or maybe that's just when he's dressed as a woman. I don't know. Let's not judge him on that one, alright? Unfortunately, Kendall is holding out the video camera which captured the whole thing, and Beau very, I want to say cleverly, but there's nothing clever about it, knocks the camera out of Kendall's hand. The SD card is probably fine though, I don't see the need for panic. Also, Lucy heard the whole thing from the other hallway anyway. She's even holding a housewarming plant which turns into a going away plant. Oh yes. Oh, get him. Get him, Lucy. All is resolved and Lucy and Kendall head back into the elevator for some good old kissing, but not before the titular surprise in Kendall's ex also showing up. This of course leads into the next episode in which Kendall must decide between Lucy or Joe, and as we know, he chooses Joe. But before all that, we have the iconic scene of Kendall walking back to the Palmwoods with the song No Idea supporting the moment. Thing is though, the lyrics make absolutely no sense if we're being honest. Like, I've thought about this a lot and it just doesn't really add up in that regard. It's still a great moment. I love all the hints alluding to Lucy, and the fact they show Joe's door plate number is neat, since some may remember it if she's living in the same apartment, which immediately tells you it's not Lucy since we've also seen her door plate. Actually, scratch that, just had a scan back of Season 2's Big Time Prom Kings, and her door plate number is literally B. It's the letter B. How do you even... How does that... Okay. Anyhow, the song is all about how he's standing there and the girl can't even notice him, which is the complete opposite of his current situation, unless that's supposed to portray how rushed he feels by their hasty choice to leave if he doesn't choose one of them quickly. But whatever, shit's banging anyway. If not that, then perhaps it's a literal interpretation. Kendall hides from them the entire episode, and so they literally have no idea that he's standing right there in the locker behind you. He's behind you, watch out, he's gonna get you. Or, perhaps again, maybe the song is from Lucy's perspective and the genders are swapped, which kind of works, but doesn't really seem to be what the scene is communicating if so. Though saying that, every sign Kendall walks past is a hint towards him choosing Lucy and not Joe, so who knows. Or maybe it's just the big old it isn't supposed to make sense and it's intentionally confused because Kendall is confused. That's some pretty abstract shit for Big Time Rush, so yeah, props. Also, the song No Idea wasn't even an original BTR song, but rather a cover of All Time Low's version. Heartbreaking. It's okay though, BTR's version is a lot better, in my opinion at least. But did you know that originally Kendall was going to choose Lucy? According to the showrunner himself, Scott Fellows, that was the initial idea, and to be honest, I think that would have been very compelling. I don't have anything against Kendall and Joe, but Kendall and Lucy is just a far more enticing dynamic for me, considering that Kendall and Joe's relationship didn't really have a lot of screen time for me to care about them. In the episode relating to this one, where Joe leaves for New Zealand, I kind of didn't really care that she was leaving. The whole goodbye kiss thing is just tacked on for that one episode, despite it being their thing, unless it's like an unspoken thing up until that point. I will say, however, that the very final shot of that episode actually really did get to me. Seeing Kendall turn away from Joe's plane taking off to his friends there waiting for him, that really moved me in a way I was not expecting at all. There's no dialogue, instead a nice little instrumental, and it's a genuinely emotional and surprising moment, seeing how they were there for him, and again, continuity, this carries on into the next few episodes, so we really get to feel how depressed Kendall is. The show actually gives itself a moment to just soak in that emotion. It feels very respectful to the characters and doesn't undermine it with a joke. I was emotionally moved by a Big Time Rush episode. What's happened? What are we doing here? Also, the crazy CEO Griffin asks Gustavo and Kelly to kidnap him, and this is honestly very on brand for him. He may actually be my favorite character. I fucking love this guy. Gustavo of course gets Logan and Carlos to do it with the feigned promise of solo records that I guess they both want. Essentially, they throw him in a dumpster and believe they have murdered and recycled him, only for Griffin to miraculously return because I guess they checked before incinerating and shredding him. Also, Griffin actually has a chip embedded in his head much like that of Freddy in iCarly. I guess that's just a thing in Nickelodeon shows. Or perhaps these two shows exist in the same universe, and Griffin is actually Freddie Benson years into the future. I mean, come on, One Direction on both shows? Unfathomable. Realistically though, it's a lot more likely that Griffin is like Freddie's father or something. I mean, the guy's a bit of a maniac and also rich, and a lot of people always wondered where Freddie got the money for all of his camera equipment. That's a bit mad, you know? Anyway, the episode ends with a great gag, and I've rambled about it long enough. Also, kind of dived into episode 7, Big Time Decision, as they are kind of, again, part 1 and part 2 of an episode. But just to clarify again, episode 6, Big Time Surprise, is the one that I'm choosing. And for season 4, we of course have episode 2, Big Time Scandal. I doubt it's controversial of me to say that this is definitely one of the best of the entire show, mainly for how fucking well it has aged. This shit aired in 2013, and so much of it rings truer now than ever, with the majority of the episode being centered around people's perception of something and what they think happened against what actually happened. This is even the highest rated episode of the entire show on IMDb. I was a bit miffed about that at first, considering the episode I actually think is the best of the show was incredibly low, but to be fair, this episode is certainly deserving of it. But I must mention that one of my initial worries going into it was the writing of Lucy. I couldn't imagine Lucy being the jealous type, to write a whole album about Kendall and essentially cancel him because of what went down between them. And yeah, I was right to think that, because she doesn't actually do any of that at all. I mean, yeah, she writes the song and the album, but after just asking her to not ruin the entire band's reputation, she immediately relents and says she won't divulge that it's about Kendall. The only reason she then threatens to do so is because Kendall just has to push his luck and can't help but correct her on the actual happenings of their half-date, as he calls it. Essentially invalidating their entire little romance and trying to make himself look like the good guy despite, to be fair to Lucy, kind of leaving her for Joe as the song says. Though it is debatable since they weren't technically in a relationship. Why is this show actually competently written, by the way? To be fair, an episode or two later, Lucy does act somewhat uncharacteristically, but the justification for it is that she wrote her best songs whilst mad at Kendall, and honestly that's a pretty great reason for it. Following this argument, Lucy has a press conference where she plans on revealing that it is about Kendall, only for the other members of BTR to save his skin and their collective reputation. So yeah, Lucy wasn't acting massively out of character like I thought she may have been, so that's good. Also, massive shout out to Joe for being just the best girlfriend here. Kendall rightly expects her to be mad with him about the song, but she's more mad with Lucy for, I guess, trying to profit off it and make Kendall look bad when a lot of the lines are, to Kendall's credit, very exaggerated. In fact, the whole song is odd. Despite being a rock star, it's incredibly poppy and sounds exactly like something you'd hear on the radio. It's like she's totally changed her sound for at least that one big single to catch on. So I guess the intent of it is still questionable. But I enjoy how equal it all feels, you know, neither one is in the wrong or right. Meanwhile, hence the title, the other members get themselves in hot water, namely Carlos and Logan. No one is surprised by one of those being a controversial figure. Man lives in that hot tub thing. While Gustavo and Kelly try to fan the flames of the paparazzi, Carlos inadvertently causes an old lady to fall off a bench, making it look like he whacked the holy shit out of her when he was really trying to shoo away a wasp that was flying around her head. Logan is then seen seemingly trying to rob an old lady when he was really helping her pick up her purse and grabbed it to help her balance as she starts to fall over. I love the moment prior to this as well, where Carlos tries to help that old lady but is immediately stopped by those three because they know how it may look. It's really interesting to see a children's show tackling this in ways that seem dramatized and exaggerated, only for it to, in the current year, be absolutely believable. It's really good shit. Logan basically says this incredibly deadpan, but I couldn't help but laugh because of how accurate it is.
Okay, here's what happened. Whatever people think happened.
They then try to stage a video of them helping Gustavo dressed as an old lady cross the street, only for him to get run over by a bus twice and fall down a manhole, because even when they try to rectify their mistakes, they're doing it in a shady and disingenuous way that doesn't work out for them. Surprise, surprise. This is kind of contrasted with James sneaking into Cher Lloyd's studio and getting Katie to take pictures of them, so it seems like he has a duet with her to dispel of the recent scandals. Once again, it's not what actually happened, but what people think happened. But again, they just keep pushing their luck and end up crashing the shoot of her music video. Luckily, Cher Lloyd enjoys the music video for some reason, as it garners a whopping 10 million views. Oh, that's probably why. In what must be like 2 hours at the most after her manager or the director released the video without her permission. It's then said that this manager or director is in the hospital, seemingly because Cher assaulted them. Cher, it's Cher, isn't it? It's not Cher Lloyd, I don't know. But violence is never funny, so I think someone should cancel Cher Lloyd for that. Of course it all works out in the end, but I just really admire how this episode tackled something like this and how well it is aged. It's very impressive and doesn't feel dumbed down or cynical despite the happenings. But even though all is well for that brief moment, the episode ends with Lucy then returning to the Palm Woods, which is sure to stir up more drama and the like. Episode 3's synopsis actually makes a point of Kendall trying to stop Joe from finding out that Lucy is back. But like, she was literally in the scene, my guy. She saw Lucy with her own 2 eyes. She knows, bro. She is aware of the current situation. Anyhow, let's finally talk about Big Time Rush's greatest ever episode. For me personally, it's none other than Season 2, Episode 11, Big Time Beach Party. Yet another 1 hour special. I don't know if it's fair to call this an underrated episode, but a 7.8 out of 10 on IMDb, this is disgraceful to see. It's kind of hard to really discuss why this episode is just so great, but it probably has something to do with there being like legitimately 6 or 7 ongoing plot lines throughout the entire episode, which is insane. They literally just threw everything they had at the wall, giving every major character something to do, and it somehow worked like really well. Kendall, James, Carlos, Logan, Katie, Gustavo and Kelly, even Kendall's mother, also named Jennifer, has a little plot. Not saying anything new here, but it's like Disney's Marvel's Avengers Infinity War, except it actually manages to stay true to the characters and doesn't disregard years of characterization and development for cool moments and such.
Elaborate on that.
No, I won't.
To start, why is it called Big Time Beach Party? Probably because they spend the whole day at a beach. Jeez, keep up. It's funny. No, but the real reason is that the guys made a deal with Griffin that if they managed to get a #1 record somewhere in the world, he would have to allow them a whole day at just one of his beach houses in Malibu. The guys succeed, landing #1 in Kerplankistan, which is a country that actually comes back in another episode of Season 2, where James accidentally gets married. As one does. So, being the nice guys that they are, they decide to invite pretty much everyone to the beach house, and it's very quickly established that each member of the group has a very specific perfect beach day which will inevitably have its ups and downs before being concluded and forgotten about. There's a fair few genuinely interesting developments that of course go nowhere because it's a special episode and they are these weird, segregated things that have nothing to do with anything but simultaneously introduce massive changes and ramifications to make the story feel grander, like the Big Time movie that bookended Season 2, except this doesn't really buy into its own hype in a way that makes it boring and limiting. Or maybe the reason nothing changes is because none of it ever happened, and James really did drown in that ocean. It's a typically funny episode with some really well done cameos that actually feel organic. It just manages to take the best elements of the show and stretch it out to a double episode without losing sight of what makes the show good, as I kinda just said. But there are some issues with it. For starters, it's the 11th episode. In the actual run of the show, they just had a Christmas-themed episode like 3 weeks prior, and now they're randomly having another big episode all to do with a beach. Had this been instead the season premiere or finale, it would have had much more staying power and would also clean up the loose ends that are never mentioned in the rest of the show. But that is admittedly a small complaint, and my only real issue with the episode and just the general writing structure of an hour-long special episode like this. Anyway, let's run through the episode to the best of our ability. Might get a bit messy with all the converging plots, but I'll just try and go through it all. Unsurprisingly, Kendall's plot is the main through line of the entire episode, with the climax and everyone's other storylines being centered around it. This all starts with Kendall just wanting to have a simple and relaxing beach day with Joe, but Joe just so happens to be stuck shooting scenes for her show. Stuck shooting scenes for a show. Try saying that 5 times fast. Stuck shooting scenes for a show. Stuck shooting scenes for a show. Stuck shooting scenes for a show. For a show? Oh my. Instead, he ends up running into an old man who basically foreshadows the entire day's events before materializing a crazed fan, Sandy, do you get it, who has a knack for tossing away people's phones. Due to her mania and hatred of phones, she breaks up with her boyfriend named Tad, who later appears to challenge Kendall to an actual drag race, as suggested by the older man. And not the kind you'd expect from this show. Haha, yes. Women in that, they dress up like women. If Kendall loses the drag race, the guys will never be able to return, which is significant for reasons we'll get into soon. Everyone fucks off, leaving Kendall alone and considerable peril once more. Unfortunately for him, the other guys have their own concerns. Carlos, for example, well, he's only interested with impressing the Jennifers, which ends up being the center of his character for most of Season 3 as well. But I think I already said that in another part. The Jennifers decide to practice some social distancing, so Carlos inserts himself into Logan's storyline where he is scouring the beach with a metal detector to uncover some hopefully buried treasure, so he can prepay for medical school. Carlos wants to split the money and buy his own beach house so he can impress the Jennifers. I know how this all sounds, but the episode is good, trust me. Soon after they reach an agreement involving fanning, they run into bloody Patchy the Pirate himself, played of course by none other than Tom Kenny. I told you this shit banged. Patchy joins the two and they all work together to find his grandpappy's secret treasure. After finding the first remnant, we'll say, of the treasure hunt, Logan immediately notes that the map is upside down and they set off on their adventure. One whoopee cushion and song number later, they find themselves back in the beach house, where Logan again uses his galaxy-sized brain to deduce that they must dig in the basement. Unfortunately, that's where Griffin's ancient, priceless Ming Vast collection is stored, but fuck it, we're already here, get the jackhammer out, lads. They actually do find buried treasure, but unfortunately don't have the key, so they just use a cannonball instead, somehow not realizing that they're about to fire directly into one of Griffin's cars. Eventually, it dawns on Patchy that he actually has the key, so they open it, only for Griffin to appear and claim the treasure as his own, because the rich are always getting richer, I suppose. Also, really funny gag about where Patchy's getting all his equipment.
Where did you get a cannon? Cannon store.
The guys are then informed by, and this is his actual name, Guitar Dude, that they won't be able to return for another planned treasure if Kendall loses the drag race. Last but not least of the main boys is James, and he just wants to surf, but I suppose he didn't stop to consider if he could actually surf, and so he almost drowns, before being saved by this girl named Annie. Long story short, James starts to believe that Annie is a real-life mermaid, which leads Camille to impart some wisdom from a prior role of hers about how mermaids may in fact be real after all. She tells James that if they are to kiss, he will become a merman, which leads James to contemplate whether or not he'd give up his legs and life for a girl he just met. Extremely relatable content. This is certainly one of the more interesting aspects of the episode, seeing how quickly James actually falls for someone and is even momentarily willing to give it all up for them, considering his status as the player of the group. Even though he clearly craves a genuine connection, seeing how desperate he always becomes with the girls in the show. So he is the player, but the show always went out of its way to portray James as being really clingy and desperate. To be fair though, he actually has really great relationships and moments with two of the primary female characters in Katie and Camille, so it's not like he's a total incel or something. As mentioned, his temptation is momentary, but oh no, it's too late, he's gotten caught up in the moment again, nice reference, and starts having a seizure. She must be a really bad kisser, wow. Of course, this Annie isn't a mermaid and just grew up near the ocean. Yeah, it's dumb, but I also like it because of how well the storyline understands James. This wouldn't work as well with Carlos or Logan, for example. Maybe that's a weird point to make, but I appreciate it. The characters all feel like they're doing things that they would be doing. It never crosses the line of absurdity to where it becomes unbelievable. There is, however, one massive issue with this plotline. But we'll again come back to that later. Even the other main characters have their own plots that all kind of relate to Big Time Rush in some way or another. This shit really branches off and then all comes back together at the end. It's masterful. So then you have, of course, Katie, Kendall's little sister, who tries to become Russell Brand's manager because honestly, why not? She could manage it and she does, proving to be extremely good at it and promising a performance from the titular band for his party. We also have Kendall's mum, who tries to protect the boys from cancer by forcefully spraying them with sunscreen during an impromptu performance of their song Boyfriend. How dare she? And last but maybe least, Gustavo and Kelly also decide to form a plan that will ruin Big Time Rush's day in the hope that Gustavo won't lose them to the beach lifestyle as he did a prior band. Not much really happens here other than Gustavo just injuring himself and getting killed at one point. It's kind of funny how they never even interact with the guys despite trying to ruin their day. You reap what you sow. Or something. I don't know if that's actually applicable, but okay. Now that everything has been established, let's just skip to the climax and wrap it all up. So of course, Kendall is about to challenge this mad, bad, rad guy named Tad to a drag race. Ugh. The other members of BTR show up and rightly berate him for getting into a drag race, especially since, as mentioned, if Kendall loses, they can never return to this beach. But it's not as if James would never be able to see Annie, and I doubt Patchy's other treasure hunt is entirely localized at this one beach, but Whatever, stakes are stakes. It's no surprise to say that Kendall does win after running over Gustavo and performing one sick jump from a ramp. I don't know the vernacular. Long story short, he wins and all is well. He finally rids himself of the obsessed fan and works everything out with Joe. Katie then appears to ask them if they would perform at Russell Brand's party. And that's pretty much your lot. Happy days for everyone. But of course, I did mention some issues that I had with the episode. First off, after everything Gustavo and Kelly go through, Kelly tells Gustavo that if the boys really love this Malibu beach house so much, then they can just move the studio out to Malibu. Now, obviously this doesn't happen and is never mentioned ever again. To be fair, the scene is played out as if it's a joke, but the way she says it implies that maybe they would actually do it. But I suppose they don't own this beach house, and since Griffin owns the studio as well, maybe he just didn't want them around after the mayhem they rained down on his estate. Fair enough, I suppose, yeah. But my main issue with this episode and with special episodes at large is that there is such a massive emphasis put on Kendall's victory of the drag race, and yet the guys never once return to the beach. They never even talk about it or mention it at all. If this shit happened to me or you, it'd be the most exciting and dramatic day of our lives. I would bring it up constantly. But that's the thing about special episodes. They kind of deviate from the main story so heavily in a contained way, only for the developments of the episode to presumably play a massive role in the entire rest of the show. So when none of that really matters at all, it just feels a little bizarre. If you get me. It's a lot of words, I know. Like, come on, why isn't Katie spending the rest of the show managing Russell Brand? Where is he? He's not doing anything. He's not in any movies anymore, is he really? Got him. It's not really. Admittedly, this isn't a massive issue. I am kind of clutching at straws to find something to criticize. But the specific problem I have with it is that James's new girlfriend, Annie, is also never mentioned again. She doesn't appear in any other episode, she's never spoken about, it's never made clear what happened between them. It just ceases to exist, and it is kind of jarring to me. The way the rest of the show plays out, you'd think that Kendall actually did lose the drag race, seeing how inconsequential it ends up being. Maybe they just had no interest in bringing the character back, but I do genuinely think that this episode marks a big development of sorts for James's character, and then it's kind of forgotten about. Again, in the grand scheme of things, who really cares? The episode is still great, even more so as a standalone thing when you consider how negligible it all is, but it could have been handled just a little bit better, I think. On the whole though, of course, this is just a fantastic episode. While I do enjoy James's storyline and characterization a lot, obviously the standout plot here is the treasure hunt with Patchy the Pirate. I mean, how could it not be? I also think Carlos and Logan are one of the best pairings on the show, and I personally think Logan is the funniest physical actor of the bunch, so it's just tailor-made for me. Kendall's plot is probably the most uninteresting, but I do like how he keeps trying to overcome it by avoiding just saying to this girl that he doesn't want to be with her, and he somehow manages to make it worse for himself at every turn. Not to suggest he doesn't try to tell her, but I love how he just gives up on it and instead tries to make her jealous to almost scare her off. He's even shown at one point to have dug himself into a hole. That's what you call visual storytelling, guys. And while minimal, I actually enjoy that the other side characters get something to do and that it doesn't take up the main focus of the episode. Everyone else is doing their own thing and it just adds some extra depth and detail to it. Yeah, good episode, you know? Now, while I do genuinely enjoy the show, it would be very silly of me to not mention the music of Big Time Rush. Undoubtedly, if you've ever heard of Big Time Rush, it won't be because of a television program, it'll be because of their music. During the run of the show, BTR released 3 albums in total. I recently re-listened to them for this video, and just a year prior to that, I re-listened to them for the first time in maybe a decade. Unsurprisingly, with songs like Till I Forget About You, Boyfriend, Halfway There, and the title track, the first album is regarded as the best by far. It certainly holds the most nostalgia and exists in that weird period of time where some pop music actually had real instrumentation, making BTR really more of a pop rock group than anything, I'd argue. My personal favourite song off the album is between Till I Forget About You or Halfway There. I can't really decide. The first album is really just a warm hug for me. I knew I'd love it and I remember it fondly, where with the second album, I'd kind of forgotten how much I loved it. While I do love the first album, I actually kind of prefer the sophomore effort, Elevate. Yes, the cover is atrocious, but I really enjoy the songs on here. The first 4 songs are some of BTR's best, and I think most of the songs are pretty enjoyable, if a bit repetitive. Strangely enough though, my reasons for preferring this album are directly related to the show itself and the memories I have attached to these songs. It's kind of a weird, symbiotic relationship that they have. I love the song No Idea because the moment in the show is so significant and memorable, but I also just love the song on its own anyhow. I'd say No Idea is probably my favorite, but again, any of the first 4 could take it on any given day. So by the tiniest sliver, I prefer Elevate, and it truly was like falling in love all over again. Oh yes. The first album is all vibes and jam after jam. It really goes hard, actually. The second album is a bit more melancholic, you might say, and while I definitely had nostalgia for it, I didn't really know where to place the overwhelming sense of it I got. and the first album's inclusion in the show always felt more like that of a backing track in scenes. It didn't really demand your attention or involve itself in the moment like parts of Elevate does. Their third and currently final album, 24/7, is easily my least favourite, but it isn't too bad, and I suppose it never really had a chance anyway. This is also the album that the guys themselves wrote the most songs on out of all three, and it's pretty obvious with certain songs like Crazy For You being written, of course, by Kendall. I definitely have the weirdest relationship with this one because when listening to it for actually the first time, I didn't really have any concrete memories from the show, so I kind of had to just let the music stand on its own, and it kind of falls short in that sense. But in a weird way, after finishing up Season 4, I ended up enjoying some of the songs even more. For example, that song I just mentioned, Crazy For You, was actually one of my least favourite songs on the album, but when I saw the way it was utilised in the show in another aforementioned moment, I really enjoyed it and it instantly grew on me because of how they used the song on the show. I guess what I'm getting at here is that most of my enjoyment of the songs comes from their inclusion on the show itself, but I'm still able to enjoy the songs either way. It just helps a little to have some nostalgia for it. Songs like Confetti Falling and We Are serve as pretty good anthemic tunes, much like Halfway There, but the whole album otherwise takes on a more subdued approach. I would rank the first two as pretty much a tie, so this one does definitely fall down in comparison, but again, I still enjoy it for the most part. There are, however, some very strange omissions. Currently on Spotify, the song Stuck from the first album isn't available, and it's actually a really nice, low-key kind of acoustic song, but for some reason it's been taken off. Apparently it was a bonus track, but I don't see why it is no longer available. Carlos actually gets to do something for once, it should exist for that reason alone. It doesn't even end there, as the bonus tracks for the first album included songs like Famous, Any Kind of Guy, and This Is Our Someday. How does a song like Famous not make it on the official album? Have you fucking heard Logan's verse at the end, bro? He absolutely decimates the entire rap industry in just a few bars. Man did not need to go that hard. God. Nah, for real though, it's actually insane. Like, it's actually sick. What? How? I don't know who came up with that. I don't know where that came from. Again, Famous. Actually not a BTR song. It's actually a song from someone else. I don't even know. I'll figure it out for the video. But, like, incredible. Incredible. I don't know whose idea that was. But wow. Yep. A lot of the songs omitted are, to me at least, pretty iconic, so it's just bizarre that they're not put on the albums officially. 24/7 also has about 5 bonus tracks, but they're easily the worst songs on the album, so I don't really mind ignoring those ones. But no omissions are as strange and just idiotic as the one found on Elevate, where the song Paralyzed isn't and wasn't ever on the official album. Instead, if you purchased the album from BTR's website directly, you'd get it as a bonus track. I don't know whose idea it was to leave this song off. Paralyzed is easily better than a good majority of the songs already on Elevate, and it's by far one of the most iconic moments in any episode of the show. How do you not include that song on your album? These boys literally performed a song in the middle of traffic just to prove they were rock and or roll, and that's the song that gets left off your album. Why? Like, actually, why? I'm mad. I'm mad about that. Come on. On the whole, I really actually enjoy Big Time Rush's music, even to this day. I actually wrote out some reviews for the albums mentioned, so if you want to hear more of my thoughts, then you can check that out somewhere. I don't know. And I suppose that's all there is left to say about Big Time Rush. As mentioned at the beginning of the video, probably an hour ago now, the guys are set to make a 2-show comeback, and they've even released a new song which I haven't heard as of writing this, for some reason. Big Time Rush as a show is kind of a weird one. I feel like most people remember the show fairly well, but I don't think anyone would really consider it the best or their favorite Nickelodeon show. It's like your go-to above average pick if you were ranking the shows. I'm not sure where it ranked for me personally, probably higher than most people would though. I just really enjoy how the show is shot in comparison with other Nick shows, and the sound editing is really crazy. Those guys can't go a few seconds without something happening. I'm admittedly blowing smoke up the show's ass quite a bit, but I do genuinely think it outshines shows of that similar time, but that's me. The show is fine, and if you watched it when you were younger, you'll probably still enjoy it to some degree, but I wouldn't be running out to watch it other than the few episodes I mentioned. Those ones are genuinely fantastic. So, as per usual with my videos now, I need to have a bit of a ramble before it actually ends. With my Xbox Game Pass video, I went really hard for the wanky sentimental ending, but this time around, it didn't really make as much sense to do so. That is until I actually finished the video, which is now as you're hearing this. I actually initially mentioned High School Musical in the intro as something I'd revisited this year because I actually rewatched the trilogy. But I decided to cut it out because I'd already mentioned so many other things. But now I wish I'd kept it in because much like High School Musical, Big Time Rush was a big, formative, seminal, those sorts of words. It was like a big thing for me as a kid, you know. It was quite a big inspiration. I remember getting singing lessons and trying to learn those songs, and you're trying to sing like all 4 parts at once, or knowing me, I was probably just singing Kendall's part. And so, as I say, after having finished the video now, I realized like how much I actually enjoyed their music. Like obviously I say, oh, I love the music, and I do genuinely, but I didn't realize how much I actually enjoyed the music, because I still do enjoy it even now, like a lot. And yeah, I guess it meant more to me than I thought it did. But I don't really have a whole lot to say about that, all the sappy stuff, but I'm glad Big Time Rush exists, I'm glad Big Time Rush exists, and I got to grow up with it and such. So there's your wanky sentimental ending. But yeah. Also, there are many specific moments in songs and just other songs in general that I didn't get to mention that I really like. So I'll just mention that the ending of the song Any Kind of Guy is the greatest ending to any song I've ever heard in my life, and I mean that with absolute sincerity. There you go. I mean that with absolutely no joke whatsoever. It is the greatest ending. The little refrain, and then it comes back again the second time. Oh my god. It's so good. I love it. Genuinely love it. So this video took a little while to come out, obviously. I've kind of committed to this idea that I had prior, where I would release one video every year at least. Just it was like this unofficial rule that I just made up in my mind, and I decided, alright, this year I'm gonna actually commit to it, and it's gonna become like an official thing that I do. And then, as of recording this, it's the 26th of December, but the video will probably be out by the end of December, so technically still counts, even though we're still in 2021, hopefully. But the reason this video, I mean, it's a multitude of reasons why this video took so long. Mostly just me not being able to get around to it, couldn't be bothered, as I mentioned earlier. I started watching the show in like June, and again, now it's December, it's been half a year, because I just couldn't be bothered, I couldn't get around to it, and some things came up that distracted me, and you know how it goes. But also because I was making a video prior, about over a year and a half, about almost a year and a half ago now, I was making a video where it was basically just me sitting down and playing through like 5 minutes of every game that I own on Steam. And the idea was that I was going to play a little bit of every game I owned that I had never played, to try and whittle it down and try and find like a few games that I really wanted to play, because I just had so many games and I didn't know what to play. And so I was making that video, and I was editing it for like a few months, and I was again kind of getting like, kind of losing interest in it, kind of falling off it, not really, kind of procrastinating, kind of pushing it off. And then randomly one day the power goes out while I have the video on, and I'm watching it back to kind of determine if I will actually go through with it, and then the power goes off, and the video's corrupted, and I can't actually finish it now. Well, actually, yeah, I copied the idea from Linus Tech Tips, because he did something like that, very, like, short, really, like, truncated version of that, and I wanted to just, essentially just copy that video. And so the very beginning of the video was just a clip from a Couch Up video, something about, oh, you stole that guy's content, that's the way YouTube works. And then it was like a whole thing, you know how I do, I'm sure. So there were some funny moments, some things I was upset didn't get to come to fruition, but at the end of the day, the video wasn't really coming together, and I would have only finished it for the sake of finishing it, so yeah. So I'm not really sure what the next video is going to be. I could make mention of it here, and then that'll make me like commit to it, but it will probably be a big video if I do it, so I'm not sure. This video ended up being a lot bigger. Not time-wise, like it didn't take very long to make or put together. It was quite easy in that regard, as you can tell, because the editing here is like minimal at best. But I'll say it. So I was planning on doing a video on the Back to the Future video game by Telltale Games. Because that game, pretty much from December 2020 to May 2022, that's like a period where you could do like, oh, it's a 10-year anniversary, who cares? But that gets people clicking, maybe, I don't know. So that was an idea that was kind of floating around in my mind for a while, and I was thinking I'd replay the game, do a video on that. Just because the reason I say May 2012 is because the first episode released in December of 2010, but the full game physically didn't release until May 2012 or around that time. So you kind of have like anywhere in between there. I could still make it now, like I could still make it now, and that would be fine. But I did have an idea instead of that, and this is just kind of how my mind works. Instead of making a video about Back to the Future, why don't I just make a video on every single game made by Telltale Games? So that's kind of the next idea, if that works out. I don't know how long that video is going to take me. It's going to be such an annoying video to make. It's going to take forever to just play through the games, and some of the games don't exist anymore. Like, you can't buy them anywhere. They're not on Steam or on like PlayStation Network or the PlayStation Store. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge to just actually do, like, just practically how am I going to get some of these games. But luckily I do own I do own a majority of the games already, so I should manage that. So yeah, essentially the next video idea should be, here's every Telltale game, and I'm going to talk about them. That's essentially the idea, because that's just how my mind works. I'll go like, oh, I should make a video about The Walking Dead, because I've already done one about Season 3, A New Frontier, and I've already done one about the first episode of Season 4. And then my mind's like, no, you should just make a video about every Walking Dead game. No, you should make a video about every game made by Telltale Games. And then it just keeps building and building, because not even because I want to make like a 3-hour video. Like, I have no interest in actually doing that, because who would want to sit through that? And who would want to edit that? But my mind just kind of keeps going and going. I'm like, oh, well, I should just do everything at once and just cram it all into one video, instead of trying to make one video and then make another video and whatever. And also, with making a video on Telltale Games, now just seems like the best time to do it, since they haven't released an actual game in like 3 or 4 years, right? Since Walking Dead Season 4, the final season, they haven't released anything, because obviously the company kind of fell apart after that, like right after I uploaded my video, which is quite funny. And so obviously with that, we know they're making Wolf Among Us 2, and they're making some other game that got announced, like The Expanse or something, whatever that's about. So I figure now's the best time to do it, because they haven't released a game in years, and usually they would release at least 1 or 2 games every year, and there would be no time to actually talk about them. It's like Call of Duty, I was going to make a video about that as well. I was going to do a video about every Call of Duty campaign, and I was going to talk about each of them and play through them all. But with the whole Activision shit going on, I'm like, maybe let's not bother right now. So that could be a potential video at some point. But again, with Call of Duty, there's a new one every year, so your video is going to be out of date as soon as it goes up within the year or so. So making a video on Telltale Games and all their games makes a lot of sense, because they haven't actually made a game for a few years now, where prior, obviously, they uploaded, they would release a game they'd release a game or two every year. So it just makes sense to me. It makes sense to get that video done as quick as I can, put it out there. I'm sure as soon as I do make the video, Wolf Among Us 2 will just silent drop, it'll just be there. But maybe I can do a separate video on that if it comes out, when it comes out, hopefully. And if not, maybe while I'm editing the video, it'll come out and I'll be able to just add it on there at the end. Who knows? But whether the video includes Wolf Among Us 2 or not, I just think it makes sense to do it now, with the absence of their games, when usually they just throw everything at us. So yeah, expect that at some point within the year, I guess. No promises, but maybe also yes promises, because we're doing a video every year now. I do want to try and upload more than once a year, because these videos, as proof of this video, they don't take a year. Like, I don't take a year to upload a whole video, and I work on it, like, just winding it down, like, scrupulously, or whatever the word is. I take, like, in total, like, a few months to make a video, and it's mostly just me putting it off. And with this video, obviously, had a bit of a time limit, so I kind of just kept pushing myself, even if I didn't want to edit it. And it came together pretty well, I think. Pretty okay, pretty tolerable, we'll say. And also, of course, unfortunately, can't forget, just last month or so, my Uncharted 4 video, the very first video I ever uploaded, turned 5 years old. What a bag of shit it is, though. It's quite bad, and it's really annoying as well, because it's the only video on my channel now that gets, like, any attention, any views, and I get the same comments every time. It's like, guys, I like Uncharted 4 now. It's okay, we can all calm down now. But, you know, I get it. It's 5 years old. No one's going to know that until they watch it, and then I respond to them, or they see some comment where I'm like, no, I actually like the game now. I was planning on doing like a special anniversary video where I'd sit and I'd react to the video, or I don't know, I'd run through it, or I'd like take notes of the video. I'd watch it, I'd take notes, and then I'd do like a giggles react type thing. Remember that? And then I'd do a video like that. It'd be like half an hour long. But I couldn't, like, there were so many little annoyances, and I stopped within like the first 4 minutes when I first tried to watch it, because there were, as I say, just so many little things that just got on my nerves and I had to mention, but there were too many things to mention. So unless I did like a live stream, which would have been quite fun, you know, we all get together and watch it, all 4 of us, you know, that would have been cool, I guess. But I just didn't really care, and I felt like by the end of all those ideas and all those things I was thinking about, I felt like the best way to commemorate and remember the Uncharted 4 video is to just not remember it, is just to not celebrate it, just forget about it, bury it, let it stay there, let's not dig it up, let's just leave it there, because I want to forget about that video. I'm not going to delete it, because it's the first video I made, and I'm not like, I mean, I am quite ashamed of that video now, I suppose, but, you know, it is the first video I made, and so it's significant in that way, and to delete it now would seem like I never actually disliked Uncharted 4, which I did, actually, for a time. Which is, of course, why I made the video. So yeah, best way to commemorate that video, best way to remember it, is to just ignore it. Just forget it happens. Okay. Yeah, I think that's the idea for now. So basically, none of my video past ideas really came to fruition, but this one got done somehow. Video about Big Time Rush. Does anyone care? Well, we'll find out. So yeah, not sure when the next video will be. You're now probably just watching some random FIFA clips, because that's the way I end my videos now, I guess. But yeah, thanks for watching if you did, as always. Had a bit of a ramble here. Probably forgot something, but it's probably not that important. Yeah. Be seeing you, or something. Okay, see you then.